Arceus has been deemed the god of all Pokemon, but it is nothing more than the god of a cult. Despite its greater power and being considered the god of Pokemon, why is it such an obscure creature? Why was it forgotten after Hisui and lost to time until we encountered it once more in modern-day Sinnoh? And why is it that we find a slew of other Pokemon being worshipped throughout their world? The colossal titan known as Regigigas, the bringer of harvests, Calyrex, even Bronzong have been worshipped as a rain god. These and so many other cults exist within the world of Pokemon, and they've been hiding in the shadows until now as I bring to you the many cults in the world of Pokemon. Howdy there, I'm Krillin, connecting the world through Pokemon, and this whole topic started because of not only what we see within Pokemon Legends Arceus, but also within the movies, as multiple people have been seen worshipping the gods of Sinnoh and more. I'll begin with our many Pokemon of Sinnoh that are strangely worshipped, then we'll work through the rest of the regions and the many historic beliefs that humans have developed around Pokemon in the world of Pokemon. Arceus itself has been worshipped by at least 3 groups of people within the world of Pokemon. We have those that came from Sinnoh, who must have built the temple we experience within the original Arceus event. Then we have those who originated from Machina Town in the Arceus and the Jewel of Life movie, and then those who originate from Arch Valley, as we see with Hoopa and the Clash of Ages. Let's just begin with the one you're most familiar with, the Sinnoh people, and technically the Diamond and Pearl clans of Legends Arceus. We can firstly assume that the people who were here before the Diamond and Pearl clans were the Sinnoh people, potentially the Celestica people being the same people because of the old verses that were left behind. I'm not going to go through all of them here, but there is one specific verse that states the following: wintry, austere, brimming with strange power, certainly the land of Hisui bears some resemblance to Sinnoh. Here, where the ancient Sinnoh people were born, I will spend an eternity until the one with the mission appears. Of course, then, this ties to the Sinnoh ruins, where we witness Arceus alongside Cynthia and are revealed the secrets of the universe, which, honestly, I would imagine would be a lot for a mortal like us to understand. Imagine God just slapping his hand onto your head and saying, "You will now see everything from before the universe began, all the way through the modern day and your arrival." It's dope, but my head would explode. Nevertheless, here is where we choose to have it create an egg of Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina, showing us that there is more than one of them in existence, and Arceus truly is the god of all Pokemon. Then, of course, in Legends Arceus, it is confirmed that the Arceus we know is just one of many, and there is only one greater, original, unnamed, nameless one out there. There's a chance even the original people of Sinnoh knew this, and that is why they would call it Almighty Sinnoh and other similar names. What's strange is that between the Sinnoh people disappearing, hiding amongst the Diamond and Pearl clans, or whatever else they may have done, because they definitely didn't die out, the many people of the world forgot who Arceus was. In fact, it's like they forgot who Arceus was before those clans arrived, or maybe didn't even know Arceus existed in the first place. In the movies, we learn about Arceus for the first time in the Jewel of Life movie as it awakens. It's through Sheena and Kevin that we begin this journey, or rather, it's thanks to them arriving and calming down Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina by speaking to their hearts that we get to learn about Arceus waking back up and how these two have been preparing for this grand event. Now, I'm not going to go through the entirety of that movie today. I have a whole video I'm working on regarding every movie and how canon they are, coming very soon with a very special sponsor, but instead, I'm going to focus on their worship of Arceus here in this video, because as we learned through the old verse, Arceus wishes for humanity and Pokemon to live in harmony with one another, and here we see that Sheena and her ancestor Deimos are given the power to speak to the hearts of Pokemon, no matter how powerful those Pokemon are. They just, at least in the movie, need to break through their rage, which is something that Deimos even does to Arceus, meaning that this power they are granted is technically greater than the Arceus that we are aware of, that it may be directly granted by the true Arceus, the original one. This makes sense because, once again, they are technically worshipping a greater god above Arceus that, again, has no name. Then this connection with nature digs even deeper because of Murray, Baraz, and Gris in the Hoopa movie. They even hold the symbol of Arceus, something that is recognized by Ash and the gang, but not instantly. Again, this just shows us that even after many years, that Arceus is still not worshipped by everyone, which is wild to me, right? Because speaking factually, you have 100% direct proof that an all-powerful god exists. You have been shot backwards through time by Dialga. You see space being ripped apart by Palkia, and for some reason, the world is still like, nah, no idea who that is, no reason to worship it, I'll pass. But there's a very strong reason for this, actually, and it's because while Arceus might be the almighty Sinnoh, or a fragment of it, it is truly just one of many gods within the pantheon of Pokemon. And no, I'm not just talking about the other pieces of Arceus that exist. To take a tangent, something that I mention often within the theology of Pokemon, and cosmology technically, is that it is heavily inspired by many different religions and beliefs, but takes an incredible root in Shinto belief. I'll keep it simple here because I've talked about this in depth in a dedicated video or two, but essentially Shinto gods are kami, which better translates to spirits of nature. As such, it makes perfect sense that there would be other incarnations of nature that people would worship and could gain boons from. And in the case of Arceus here, while there are plenty of other Pokemon that grant life through incredible power, we watch as the power of Arceus is gifted to its most devout followers, and they can not only reach to the hearts of Pokemon, but they can do so much more, as we see through Gris. He not only harnessed the power of the Pokemon elements to mimic the plates of Arceus and create the prison bottle to put an end to Hoopa's chaos, but he also made friends with Hoopa and imparted some sort of life energy into a seed to then make it grow instantly. The greatest difference then is that powers from Arceus may be some of the most powerful in comparison to other deities, knowing that it created existence as we know it, and as the Pixie Plate then states, the original one is in all things, the original one is nowhere at all. Its power given to humans, Pokemon, plants, everything that lives and doesn't live, yet so few know of its existence because it is not physically present. It is nowhere, yet everywhere. And so despite being the central god of a pantheon, it is hardly known and has been regarded as a myth or a tale of the past to most people that we at least know of as a player or enjoyer of the media franchise, right? Leaving Arceus itself, at the very least, as a being worshipped by so few people that it is no more than a cult at the end of the day. By strict definition, at least. Onto Dialga and Palkia, they're simple but complicated all the same, because the Diamond and Pearl clans came into what was Hisui and took over the lands while arguing with each other about who the almighty Sinnoh really was. Diamond praised Dialga as almighty Sinnoh, Pearl praised Palkia, both believing truly that their own god was the one true Arceus, while being, of course, wrong. The main reason they seemed to not fight in the past was because of a man that was central to the region, a man that looks like Champion Alder, who would have likely been the legendary hero with noble Pokemon as per the tales. I say only likely because we don't have 100% clear proof as to when the Sinnoh people left these lands, when the ancient hero of Hisui teamed up with the noble Pokemon, or anything else. It's just a lot of stories being told. But we can make a very strong claim that this hero would have stayed for quite some time, as we have 10 noble Pokemon in the game, 6 Pokeball-like objects at this man's neck, and 2 Pokeballs each for the only 2 other major portraits of the Diamond and Pearl clan leaders, who look a bit like Archie and Maxie, adding up to 10 total Pokeballs for 10 noble Pokemon. And while this all seems to line up, it is strange that if the hero was ever to state that Dialga and Palkia were the children of Arceus, that he would not be believed. So for whatever reason, we don't know the exact relationship of this seemingly ancestor of Champion Alder, and his relationship to the clans, and his relationship to, well, Dialga, Palkia, and Arceus. Clearly, he was granted power through Arceus and having the noble Pokemon, but maybe he didn't worship Arceus while still having a very strong connection to nature as a whole. Don't know. It gets a little confusing. All we can estimate then is that this likely is the hero. They saved the people from Giratina. Then both of these original leaders, again that look like Archie and Maxie, would have continued praying to their own version of almighty Sinnoh, then leading those religious aspects to create, or rather continue, the quarrels between Diamond and Pearl clans. As time would move on, the clans would still fight, but thanks to Kamado and the Survey Corps, they would be kept somewhat civil until the end of the game, where they realized the error of their ways and that they just shouldn't fight anymore. Also, because, their god is not the god. This also relates to the real-world relationships between religious groups and the central government within the end of the Edo period and the beginning of the Meiji Restoration, as the government was trying to force a central religion onto everyone at the time in opposition to Zen Shinto belief. It's genuinely crazy how many ties there are with Hisui and our real-world past. Their worship of Dialga and Palkia do go deeper, as it turns out. Not only do they not put their Pokemon in Pokeballs at all, but all members who are not wardens or leaders are named after measurements of time for the Diamond Clan, and for the Pearl Clan, they have measurements of distance for names. As for how they worship Dialga and Palkia, it's of course incredibly similar all in all. They are reflections of each other, and they make it clear that they're bothered by capturing Pokemon in Pokeballs in the first place, stating, "Almighty Sinnoh made Hisui vast so Pokemon could live freely throughout. We're meant to stand alongside Pokemon, not count ourselves above them." They also strongly believe in the old verse. Even if they don't see the physical papers themselves, if it's an oral history or secluded somewhere we can't access, we still know that they believe in this verse. Because not only do they state that info, but they of course all love the noble Pokemon, which are part of the old verse. What's weird is that they split the noble Pokemon up like they're divorced parents. The good thing is that both clans do want to take care of the noble Pokemon, but they fight over who the noble Pokemon belongs to effectively. Through this though, they know that something is wrong with the noble Pokemon, as they know in their hearts that their almighty Sinnoh would never betray them and have the noble Pokemon rampage against them. And to be fair, they are technically right with the Jewel of Life movie in exclusion, because extenuating circumstances. Arceus was technically betrayed multiple times. I'll also note here that the noble Pokemon are also worshipped and regarded as sacred creatures, especially their parents that we don't get to see. But they're more like minor gods of the pantheon. Proper kami, actually. Because there were two ways that attaining kami was said to happen. One was by birthright, which is why Volo yells and rants and raves about how it is his right to meet Arceus, but yet we are the ones to meet him. The other way is by simply achieving greatness, which is something we see reflected with the two Hisuian Growlithe. The smaller of the two was the noble, as opposed to what you would expect of a noble Pokemon, which is usually larger, but it had not accepted its duties yet, thus not evolving and transforming into its full noble form, which effectively means to become a kami you have to achieve greatness. And unfortunately, once it did accept it, that it was the one meant to protect these lands and that it would do so, Giratina's lightning struck it and made it rampage. Oops. So these are pretty important Pokemon when understanding that Legends Arceus really hit hard at the Shinto belief and ideas through their Pokemon and characters. Speaking of characters, Adaman and Irida at some point do admit they have never seen Almighty Sinnoh themselves, but still know that Dialga presides over time, while Palkia presides over space, interestingly enough. Which of course brings us to their connection to the people that were once here, and the many statues that exist at the Coronet Highlands, which bears Mount Coronet. It's also here that we experience something wild. When we do get to fight Dialga or Palkia, we are not the ones to speak to them or have them speak to us. Instead, Dialga speaks to Adaman while Palkia speaks to Irida, depending on who you chose at the end game. As they state, "Ah, I can hear Almighty Sinnoh. No, it's called Palkia. Mighty Palkia is speaking to me in my mind. Space-time grows chaotic. The power fails. The frenzied one. It comes now to fight. That is why I am here." And of course, we then catch them and with their help, fight their other half. This is arguably the most important piece of understanding these beliefs within Pokemon and kind of proving this really isn't a cult. Which, it really isn't from the first place. They are large groups of people who are accepted as per, following their religion here, to my understanding. So to know that despite us being the main character, despite us being clearly stronger and arguably having a stronger bond with our Pokemon, we are not the ones spoken to. Instead, it is the leader of the clan respective to Dialga or Palkia who receives the message from their god. the one that they thought was the almighty Sinnoh. To explain, belief within the world of Pokemon is an incredibly strange thing. It is a scientifically proven thing. Yeah. The more you believe in something, the more it is likely to come true, or the more powerful something becomes. We'll visit this subject again way later with Calyrex as a 100% proven direct example. So then the question does become, as we come back to Dialga and Palkia, if you believe in something, or you have a cult believe in something, and then expand it into a widely known proper religion, not just a cult, then what happens? Well, it seems that it becomes true, and the world begins to shape energy to become what you believe in within this world of Pokemon, which would then explain why people are so easily able to forget Pokemon, and how they then begin to have less influence on people, places, and Pokemon within other regions of the world. As one other very quick example, light, like, sunlight or lights from the moon in the world of Pokemon or otherwise, has way more influence in places like Alola, as we have Cosmoem's evolution into Solgaleo or Lunala being dependent on it, alongside the different forms of Lycanroc and Alolan Executor, to name all of the more direct examples. And that light originally comes from the much greater being known as Ultra Necrozma, and of course Z-powers derive from all of this as well. Yet, that level of influence isn't found as strongly anywhere else. In fact, as of this moment, there isn't a place where an Execute can naturally evolve into its Alolan counterpart, and if we exclude Pokemon Champions, you cannot use Z moves anywhere else. So, turning ourselves back to Dialga and Palkia, other than the Diamond and Pearl clans, there is only one other location that has been strongly influenced by them, and that would be within Eterna City, where we find the statue that depicts them both as a mishmashed singular draconic being of worship, better seen in the manga. The statue was once the main center of festivals in the town, although signs of the town's culture and rituals have started to slip away alongside history overall regarding it. The statue can have two different plaques: the creation of Dialga, the giver of time. In laughter there is tears, and likewise it is with time. The same time flows on, for it is the blessing of Dialga. The second one says the birth of Palkia, the creator of parallel dimensions, which, yeah, parallel dimensions have existed since before Generation 4, let's be real here. Alive, yet not alive, everything drifts in space to arrive in the same universe. It is the blessing of Palkia. There is even a man in the city that states there was once a third plate within Pokemon Platinum, but it is now lost. We can make the assumption then that this plate would have belonged to Giratina, another relic of its lost worship. So once again, in the modern age, the connection between humanity and these higher-up beings has been lost, but their power remains. This is likely just because they existed long before humanity and derived their energy from Arceus itself, the one true being, which becomes even more evident when they enter their origin forms and resemble Arceus just a little bit more. Which just gets into an entirely other wild thing, which is that Pokemon do worship other Pokemon. In Pokemon Sleep, Cresselia prays to something while it sleeps. There are Pokemon that bring offerings to those more powerful than themselves, and so much more. I am not digging into all of that today, but it basically shows us that Pokemon have a crazy amount of intelligence to the point where they have their own beliefs and rituals. What the takeaway from this then is that Dialga and Palkia, who derive their power from Arceus, and then all of them in turn getting their power from the original one, only means then that their own worship keeps everything alive despite all humans forgetting about Arceus multiple times in history, as we are now aware of. Or potentially even that Pokemon in general are aware of Arceus' presence internally, instinctually, something. But there's one other Pokemon that has been long forgotten. In fact, a Pokemon that was forgotten on purpose that drives all of this home even harder. But before we move on to them, I just want to say thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this so far, make sure you do subscribe, because I guarantee you will love the rest of this video, especially when we get into the minor cases of people who did worship Bronzong and Hoothoot, for example. I want to thank also members of the channel. Their contributions ensure that I can take the time to deep dive and make quality content for everyone. If you want early access to videos, behind the scenes info, and members exclusive content like this list here, they're right there, then become a member for as little as $3 a month. It makes a massive difference. I want you to also know really quickly that starting in November 1st, I will have a Streamathon Nuzlocke where I draw the Pokemon and raffle them off to those that donate towards the event as I raise funds for my wedding. Lastly, let me know what Pokemon you would like to upgrade to godly levels and what it would be the god of, because that just sounds fun. Of course, someone's going to choose Bidoof, and I don't blame you. Not only do I love reading your comments though, but it also appeases the almighty algorithm alongside likes and hypes helping the channel, so make sure you do that at least. But enough of all that. Thank you once again, and on with the video. Giratina, the unwanted child banished to the reverse side of our world, as Volo likes to say at least. But there's far more to Giratina than that, as you and I know. And if you don't know, allow me to break it down. Giratina was created by Arceus, but it was created after the creation of Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf. While the Lake Trio were created to grant humanity gifts of emotion, intelligence, and willpower, they were also created to hold balance and some control over Dialga and Palkia if those two rampaged. Giratina, being created afterwards, is effectively a safeguard for if all 5 of the legendary Pokemon, discluding Arceus from being 6, were to go rogue or be controlled by some 27-year-old man with baggy eyes and spiky blue hair. It still shocks me that Cyrus is only 27. I am 27. I have the baggy eyes if I were to take off my glasses, but dear Lord, he lost his hope in humanity very quickly and decided he would never turn back. But back on track, Giratina was already created with the intent to counter the rest of the legendary Pokemon to some degree. And at least for some time, it was worshipped and known by the people of Hisui and the Sinnoh people. After all, this is why it had at least one statue within the Coronet Highlands. Whatever. We find it in the Celestica Ruins, which is Kaminagi Ruins in Japanese, meaning roughly to appease a god. In other words, the place was just created to appease the gods themselves, including Giratina here. It could also be interpreted as a way to calm or pacify a god through a shrine, which makes perfect sense for Giratina, which would then mean that Giratina was likely still known to be a Pokemon full of rage, a rage that had not been molded by the Distortion world. To explain, the Plates of Arceus quite literally tell us that this third being, Giratina, was banished to a world that already existed, a world that would shape the rage and mold it. And while that is the Distortion world, it had clearly not done its job yet. The Celestica people would still worship Giratina out of reverence and fear, as you would expect people to worship any god to some degree, and then the worst would happen. Giratina would attack at some point. The details of this event, again, aren't 100% clear, but we know that the hero of Hisui was the one to fight Giratina with the 10 noble Pokemon at his side. Though we do have to question if it was just the hero, or if the original Diamond and Pearl clan leaders were also involved thanks to the info I shared earlier. Whatever may have happened, the result was that Giratina was defeated and the statue would be destroyed by the people. But this is not the only time a statue was destroyed or forgotten or a relic of Giratina was sent away in some capacity. We would find a very similar situation within Turnback Cave in modern-day Sinnoh, the very place where we have to navigate through the ghostly and psychic-y Pokemon, sounded better in my head, within the maze to finally reach Giratina if it decides to even appear before us. What drives my interest here is that Giratina is far less known by the public, yet holds just as much power as Dialga and Palkia. It may even be argued to hold more power, and it is through this idea of worshipping it that it gained more power. Why else would they have destroyed Giratina's statue? Why would you not keep the legend alive and warn everyone of the tyrant that lives on the mirroring realm of our own, unless you were afraid of the power that belief gives to a creature? The ancient people we have yet to even meet already knew that this idea of believing in something gave it more power, that these legendary godly Pokemon and Pokemon in general gain power from worship or fear, or truly from general belief even. This is why our bond with them, in even a non-religious sense, is important towards making them stronger, because the more we believe in them, the stronger they become, for better and for worse. I mean, if you start believing a ghost-type Pokemon is gonna eat everyone's souls, and you keep believing in that, then of course it's gonna eat everyone's souls eventually, and just be better at it, I guess. And this also helps explain a grand slew of Pokédex entries, and even helps us understand that Pokemon are basically just cognito hazards sometimes. Okay, that last part, cognito hazard, might have been a little bit too far, but you can't say I'm wrong 100% after the events of Mega Dimension. That was literally a cognito hazard directly stated to us. So then, of course, we know the legend of Giratina is kept alive as Volo teams up with it, attempts to defeat us to rightfully claim the plates of Arceus, then power up Giratina so that way they can overthrow Arceus and maybe the one true Arceus. This fails, of course, and then only results in one last moment for Volo within the time of Hisui, and that is him letting Laventon know that Giratina is not a bad or evil Pokemon. It is just misunderstood and deserves to be given a chance as it turns a new leaf. And boy howdy, did it turn a new leaf. Because it's through this moment we can then assume that worship and understanding of Giratina would begin once more, thus explaining why there was once a modern day tablet for Giratina with the modern statue of Dialga and Palkia, though that too was lost, only for Giratina to reveal itself still within Pokemon Platinum and save the day. And yes, I always like to say, we did not save the day in that game. Cyrus didn't care that he lost his battle with us, and he said, "F you, I'm an adult. I don't care what we do. I don't care that a pathetic child and his Pokemon beat me. I am going to create my own universe because I have the gods of time and space under my thumb. What are you gonna do now with your weakened Pokemon?" Until, you know, Giratina arrived and slammed down on him and dragged him to the Distortion World. And even then, he's like, "No, I'm staying here. I don't care what laws I broke. I'm staying in this world that I imagined." But that effectively concludes the not-so-existing cult surrounding Giratina. How about some other Pokemon that humanity worshipped? On what is weird to say is a minor note, we have the Lake Guardians, who are directly translated from Japanese as the Lake Gods. They are revered and feared as, again, you would expect of a god, but they haven't ever really been fully worshipped anywhere by anyone, to my knowledge. But I had to at least mention them by name because I will always love that their names, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, can be broken down to just the first letters, being Uma for horse. And not only are Arceus and origin forms of Dialga and Palkia all horses, the horse is the chosen steed of the Kami and Shinto, and that's just too neat not to mention. Also, they are very much feared by humanity because humanity knows that they were granted these gifts, and these three Pokemon are rumored to be able to take it away at any point, whenever they want. On to the other major Gen 4 Pokemon I did not expect to see a worshiper of, we have Regigigas and its many golem children, the 5 Regis. Because sure, we have already gotten plenty of hints and notes that the Regis were worshipped. After all, they are all found within or sealed within shrines throughout the world. They were created by Regigigas and used to assist the colossal Pokemon with its great tasks throughout the world, and so much more, we assume. But then there's this whole thing about why they are sealed away and how, humanity even managed to do that. But I'll let you watch my theory on how humanity betrayed Regigigas for that info. Instead, I want to focus on the thing that got me interested 100%, that started getting me this inkling of I needed to make this video, as we have the reveal of Temple Maiden Maria in the anime. She was tasked with guarding the temple where the colossal Pokemon rests. She bears the colors of Regigigas, and even has 3 blue dots going down her chest and upper stomach, mimicking the 6 quote-unquote eyes of Regigigas, which, I'll be real, I have no idea if those are eyes or anything else. Like, I don't see them move. I don't think any of the Regis actually have any eyes, because those, again, never move, and they have some sort of blind sight, or at least I think they have to, of the world around them instead somehow. It won't stop me from drawing them as if they're eyes, though. It is through her that we make our way to Snow Point Temple, and learn of how this area was once an active volcano that erupted and was a cataclysmic disaster for the people of Snow Point City in the past. It was through Regigigas, Regirock, Regice, and Registeel that they were all saved, and afterwards the temple was constructed. I will also note 2 things here. The construction of the temple is going to be different than what it is in the games. Massively different, as we can visually see. But there is, of course, the chance that the story leading to this point is true, and the anime is the timeline where Regigigas never needed to be sealed away for a century or 2 and it just slumbered there. I don't know. The other thing is, do not at me for the pronunciation of Regice, because even the anime mixes it up constantly between Regice saying Reggie-Ice, and then other characters saying Regice or Reggie-Ice. It just gets weird. Say it however you want. Call it Reggie Freezy Pop if you really want to. I personally do not care because I'll still know what Pokemon you're talking about. So we're good. There's no other extensive info here, at least not that I could find, but we do at least know that Regigigas is protected, and even in the games when it was sealed away, I can guarantee you that humanity never defeated it, or at least that's my theory. It's just vibing away in those chambers, especially within Legends Arceus, wanting to take a nap after pulling all the continents around, and people just keep interrupting it. Which then of course tells you that the legend lives on, and the worship may continue as the story of the land pulling myth lives on. Now we can move on to some more minor or unknown deities within Sinnoh and Hisui. We'll look at other regions later, so no worries, I'm not skipping any major god Pokemon. I just want to go region by region, and so we have Bronzong to talk about. I feel it and Bronzor often get a bad rap, but at the end of the day, Bronzong was incredibly important in a few regions. So important that they were even imported to Galar in their time of need, as it is recognized by their Pokédex that they are not resident Pokemon there. This place that we find them primarily is within the ruins of Route 8. It's here and other places in the world where they are literally dug up from the earth as if they were taking a little nap and then live on for another 2,000 years or more. Ever since its debut, the Dex entries have stated a number of things regarding how people viewed it and its importance, stating it brought rains by opening portals to another world. It was revered as a bringer of plentiful harvests. And if the word revered wasn't somehow enough, the sword entry directly states some believe it to be a deity that summons rain clouds. When angered, it lets out a warning cry that rings out like the tolling of a bell. And guess what the final move it learns is? That's right, Rain Dance! Final moves in Pokemon are baller, because they almost always tell a really good story, and I have 2 videos on that for Pokemon from Kanto, Johto, and Hoenn, and should probably work out another video for Sinnoh and Unova Pokemon. The first thumbnail went really hard, so I gotta kind of recapture the anime magic properly, and look at that, Bronzong is actually there too. Anywho, this whole worshipping Bronzong idea comes from the Dotaku, Japanese bells which were believed to have been used to pray for good harvests. They are often decorated with patterns representing nature and were buried occasionally with bronze mirrors and weapons in isolated locations, thus explaining why Bronzor is the prior form to Bronzong, as it is a mirror. And in short, as Bulbapedia explains properly, Bronzong's Pokédex entry in Diamond may refer to the Kamiowakura site, where multiple Dotaku were discovered during construction of a farm road in 1996 by a heavy machinery operator who accidentally struck the cache of Dotaku while excavating the site, and dated to approximately 2,000 years ago in the Yayoi period. There's a lot more to that story, but I'll leave that to you to find in other videos on this channel as we can back things up and move to Kanto and the deities there. Mew is the first Pokemon here that was only ever stated to be worshipped within the Pokemon radio drama that should be canonical and was effectively the prequel to the very first Pokemon movie. In the radio drama, it stated that Mew was worshipped for its protection by ancient people who created a song in its honor and believed it appeared once a year with the rising sun. It wasn't rediscovered until 18 years after Miyamoto met Mew, Jesse's mother, by sunrise on the peak of a high mountain. The most direct comparison that I can derive from this is Amaterasu, mother to us all, the great kami of the sun itself, and the most important deity arguably within Shinto religion. Of course then, Mew is quite literally the mother to all Pokemon, as it is the ancestor of all Pokemon, with a few Pokemon here and there that, of course, it did not predate. Well, it predated them, it just isn't the direct ancestor, but Pokemon DNA was used to create things like Silvally, so Either way, there are tons of shrines within the world of Pokemon depicting Mew, but none are more evident than the ones that we find within the jungles of their world, as though Mew were worshipped within a religion parallel to Aztec or Mayan culture, and this continues to be the case even after major changes to the franchise and the separation of the world of Pokemon from the world that we live in. I will also note that if I start moving a little bit faster through these, it's just because there isn't a lot of in-world lore for them, but they're still really fun to show the connections of that people genuinely did worship these Pokemon. On Shamuni Island, we see that the 3 legendary birds, Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, are worshipped as part of balance amongst the islands themselves. It is through their islands and the island's treasures that this balance is kept, with an entire legend detailing how important this all is. Of course, the movie is all about how that balance is thrown out of whack and how the treasures have to be returned back to their rightful shrine, or the weather throughout the world and the seas and everything, or at least within the Kanto region, is going to continue being incredibly tumultuous and dangerous overall. It gets to the point where even as Lugia steps up to the plate and tons of Pokemon try to help, they watch as Lugia gets triple beamed and buried under the ice until our protagonists are able to properly bring balance, and not only watch as Lugia regains its strength, but also the legendary birds finally chill out and go back to their little islands, no longer fighting. Outside of this event, the plinths that give us the legend of these islands are well guarded, and the people are not only in strong belief of these stories, but they will also greet tourists to the island by being dressed in their festival garments. They even put on a full show when people first land, such as when they told Ash that he would be the one to save the islands as the prophecy foretold. Ironically for them, Ash was the one to save the islands. But again, I'll save the whole story of the movie for another day, and once again, I feel like it's becoming common sense. These really aren't cults anymore, but you know, it is what it is. In the 72nd episode of Pokemon, we get to learn about Pokemopolis and get to see that of all the different Pokemon that exist, Psyduck was once worshipped, as we see a little Dogu, or earthen figure of the Pokemon. While it is definitely a Psyduck here, the Dogu actually reminds me of Baltoy and Claydol, which makes sense since these are the figures that they would represent, and they are also composed of clay, earthen material. It's really funny because there's some theory that these things were used to transfer illnesses from others onto themselves. So if you had an illness or were really unlucky or had maybe a spirit haunting you, the Dogu would take your place. I know that Psyduck gets its headaches because of its latent psychic powers, but it would be really funny and unfortunate to find out that humanity may have accidentally laid a curse using these Dogu in the shape of Psyduck onto them by just making them in general. Though instead of seeing a giant Psyduck in this episode, we instead see Alakazam and Gengar duking it out as giant, almost primal marked Dynamax versions of themselves that were causing some immense damage until a Jigglypuff was released of the same caliber to then sing them back to rest and put them back away. They weren't really worshipped, but myths and stories were told about them so that way they wouldn't be released again, and they were just kind of contained as you would expect any other Pokemon to be contained inside of ancient capsules that weren't Pokeballs. Nothing else special here. As the years went on, the Pokemon introduced in Gen 1 really got a lot of deity treatment. In fact, Jynx was a Pokemon that was removed from the limelight, only to be brought back as a deity in some parts of Galar as the Queen of Ice. Which means that I could have put Jynx into the Galar portion, but we also have Alolan forms of Pokemon that are worshipped there. Whatever. It is a little weird because Jynx has always seemed to have some level of power to it. In the original Snap games, it guards the egg of Articuno, it helps release Aurorus trapped in ice in the new Pokemon Snap, and in that same new Snap, it summons Suicune with your help in giving it enough energy. If you want more on Snap, I do have a full ecology of that. It is one of my favorite videos I've ever made. And at least in Galar, it helps that they are known to have a more beautiful, delicate voice compared to other regions where this Pokemon exists, which may lean it towards yokai such as the Yamauba, who is described as always wearing a tattered kimono, having whitish blonde hair, and living on cold mountaintops. I guess when you mix rhythmic movements that cause people to dance with it, a beautiful voice that sings out in the blizzard, and a being that can just summon blizzards and freeze people into a popsicle, of course it shouldn't be a surprise that people would fear and worship this Pokemon. If you ever wondered where the tale of the Slowpoke yawn that brings rain comes from, not in the real world but within their world, it seems to be expanded on in the anime within episode 142, A Shadow of a Drought. Here is where Ash and the gang wander into Azalea Town, the same one that would bear the Slowpoke while in the games. Of course, though, it is vastly different. But the lore here still holds a bit of water, pun intended, as we get this info nowhere else, from my memory at least. In the episode, Ash accidentally commits sacrilege as he steps on a Slowpoke tail and makes everyone in the town angry, only to then be invited to dress up as Slowpoke and wait. As they stay still, the townspeople pass by without noticing the group, and they learn that there was a drought 400 years ago. Back then, a Slowpoke came into town, It yawned, and then it began to rain, saving the town from the drought. Now that the town faces said drought again, they're hoping a Slowpoke will arrive to save the day. By the end of the episode, we watch as multiple Slowpoke begin to yawn, storm clouds gather, and a downpour begins, flooding the area that then leads the water over to Azalea Town, again, saving the day. We do get to experience this in Pokopia as well to some degree, working to make things more humid to help Slowpoke become more comfortable and yawn so that way it rains. But we're kind of left wondering if it actually made it rain or not, and to be entirely fair scientifically, it does take more than just high humidity to make it rain. So Slowpoke very well does have the ability to help make it rain with a yawn, and it isn't just some false data in the Pokédex. In episode 96, Meowth rules, or rather Lord Meowth's Island, if we directly translated it. Team Rocket lands on an island where people have been waiting for a Meowth to arrive and give them great wealth. On this island, called Golden Island, there's a gold Meowth statue and people wish upon it, the Great Meowth, on nights of the full moon for a bounty to arrive and make them all wealthy. He's treated really well at first, Team Rocket's Meowth, but over time, as they discover he's unable to use Payday during his stadium fight with a Nidoking, where he is supposed to be using it to win the battle and grant them that wealth, it just kind of gets worse, because even after he wins by exhausting the Nidoking, war of attrition I guess, the villagers keep throwing Pokemon at him until Jesse and James trick the residents into believing Meowth used Payday by throwing coins and bottle caps into the arena, again, tricking them all for a while. And by the end of the episode, they do admit what they had done. Meowth apologizes for how he acted to Jesse and James during the episode, and everything ends as Jesse and James do try to get Meowth to use Payday. Because yes, that move does give legitimate currency that can be used within the world. After all, it works that way in the games and in the manga as well, so I guess it's a good thing that only a few Pokemon can use the move, otherwise the economy would be crashing real hard. And all of this just simply stems from the Maneki Neko, the beckoning cat that is said to grant good luck, money, and friends. But before I'm allowed to move on to the next generation, I have to give an honorable shout out to Lord Helix, of course. Praise be unto him. Now I can move on. Let's go to Johto. Starting out with the obvious, Lugia and Ho-Oh are so well worshipped that they have been given not one, not two, but at least 3 whole towers to represent their glory and how much they are beloved for their immense power and what they represent. If you don't know, while the Brass Tower may have burned on that fateful day, and the Bell Tower continued to live on, there was once another tower long ago. That tower would eventually be torn and transformed into the Goldenrod Radio Tower, the same tower that we save and are gifted a rainbow feather in return for, at least within Heart Gold and Soul Silver. A place that once housed Ho-Oh but for some reason was moved. A mystery I have yet to uncover, but I'll save that sleuthing for another day. Especially as they turned the Pokemon Tower full of graves into a radio tower as well, which has a lot of very strange ties and implications relating to the afterlife, Dust and Wire, and so much more. This really is no coincidence at the least, because people already worshipped both Lugia and Ho-Oh for an incredibly long time, for reasons we really aren't given in World. In our world, we can make a very easy connection of Lugia to Watatsumi, the dragon kami of the water, and the Golden Emperor that Ho-Oh is. Traditionally, Watatsumi would effectively be the great-grandparents of the Golden Emperor Jimmu, first emperor of Japan. Pokemon switches it up and seems to put Lugia and Ho-Oh on the same level, and instead of Lugia helping bear a mortal descendant, we find that Ho-Oh grants life and revival to the legendary beasts after they passed in that horrible disaster. Also want to note that there is an entire city of people that worship Lugia for saving them back in the day when a great fire happened within the Zeraora movie. But something I don't talk enough about, especially as we would have the most direct cult of them all, technically, would be the Kimono Girls. They not only share the stories of these two deities, they perform dances and shows every year with a full festival. And while this might seem like just a show or a way to bring in profits, they guard the clear bell or the title bell in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, making it so that even when you have the respective feather in this game, you cannot call to either legendary Pokemon without their approval. And even when you do make it to these locations, Lugia and Ho-Oh do not come to you without a full ritualistic dance that attracts their attention and summons them to you. I also say this with full respect because I love the Kimono Girls. I'm also sorry, but no other Pokemon is given this direct reverence and show ever again. Sure, there are plenty that have epic moments, and sure, we do get to see some baller cutscenes of legendary Pokemon when they appear, but none of them have ritualistic traditional kimono dancing that summons them to test your mettle as a trainer with a pure and honest heart. The very thing that Lugia and Ho-oh are waiting for, and the very thing that lines up with the ideals of Arceus. And that's just what it turns back into. This idea that these greater deities just wish for honest and true connections with humanity, and for humanity to bear this bond with all Pokemon. But it has to start with a small, truly devoted and honest group with big hearts, and that is the Kimono Girls. Celebi is a bit more simple, as its worship is consistent across regions. And yes, I do say across regions, because if we look beyond the games, we find it in a number of different movies, a number of different regions overall. We find its shrine in Ilex Forest of Johto, and it kind of just appears in a few other places. We see it in Alola, we see it in... Actually, what is the craziest thing that actually irritates me? Because we have, for years, sat here wondering, oh, I wonder what Pokemon Celebi brings from the future. Could it be Togepi? No, which, yes, it probably is, but we don't get that direct confirmation of it being Togepi. Instead, we get a direct confirmation of a different Pokemon. And I didn't know about it, because I'm human, I haven't watched all the movies until now, and people refuse to watch the movies and talk about them, as I only recently made the conscious effort to watch all of them and find out that Celebi brings Zarude from the future. This is not conjecture, this is not guessing, this is just the fact. Not a single Zarude knows their parents, not a single Zarude seems to be female, and Celebi is given the role of the guardian of the forest that they live in, and only returns after a long period of time of being missing by the end of the movie. And guess what? It is made very clear that Celebi is the reason Zarude eggs even exist in our timeline, or rather, that timeline, because those movies are technically a different timeline and it gets really weird. Anywho, movie video eventually happening. So sure, there is a chance that Celebi does bring other eggs from the future. I don't want to deny that, despite me being super dramatic, but we only have one Pokemon as 100% confirmation that I am currently aware of, and it sits within a movie that nobody ever says anything about, just says it's trash, doesn't care about Zarude, when it was actually a pretty solid Pokemon movie. So, beyond just being seen as an incarnation of nature that is worshipped for bringing eggs from the future and being the hope of said future and nature's prosperity, Celebi specifically brings Zarude eggs to the present day. But, at least within the Celebi movie, its debut, we do get to see people living within nature itself, a place called Arborville or Hateno Village, which translates to Village at the End. Also, that name should sound really familiar to people who like Legend of Zelda. I'm not editing that out. The people here live in souped-up tree houses effectively and respect the surrounding forest and watch over one of its main entrances for weary travelers and troublesome Pokemon poachers. They are the ones that know of Celebi, even if they haven't seen it in an incredibly long time, and they still bear its story for those that want to know it. Nice and simple. Hoothoot is a left field pick to worship, but it is, as you would expect, was seen as a deity of wisdom in some countries, versed in the ways of the world. What countries would those be? No idea whatsoever. The only place we see this is by looking at the Pokemon Violet Pokédex and nowhere else, which, I get it, owls are seen as wise, so at least it's a simple thing to figure out the basis of this. Also, I realized that said you'd be excited to hear about Hoothoot and Bronzong, but Hoothoot was pretty lackluster. Sorry about that. The last Pokemon of this generation is Togepi and its entire line, but only within the Togepi Paradise and Mirage Kingdom as we see in the anime, with Togepi Paradise being the birthplace of all the world's Togepi and the place they go back to after completing their life's mission to make the world a happier place. They will only then return as a Togekiss in the future when there is peace in the world, which is true even in the games. Every time you can reach a Togekiss in the wild, from what I could see, is always in places that are peaceful, or places and times after the main story of the game has been completed, or at least places you should only be visiting once you've completed the main story, since there are some places you can push yourself to go to before the end of the story. Now, the Mirage Kingdom needs someone with a pure heart to rule, or else everything would wither away, and the lives of all Togepi would be lost forever as their home is destroyed. And anyone who has hatched a Togepi and keeps them as their partner has the eligibility to be the king or queen of the kingdom to continue the peaceful reign over its land and protect the future of Togepi and effectively the world and the happiness therein. Honestly, if you then told me that there was some superpowered creatures that literally spread happiness to the world and are the sign of true peace, yeah, I too would probably worship and protect them as a minor deity within the world. Though it does help that I really do love Togepi as one of my top favorite Pokemon, so it doesn't take much convincing. Get me into that cult, which again, isn't really a cult because it's an entire city of people. Again, complicated. I keep forgetting to put Zygarde into my coat pocket because I have to take the little guy out every single time after I'm done doing a video. So, oops. Now, Kyogre and Groudon are incredibly strange because their history is incredibly shrouded regarding the details in a number of areas. We know they were worshipped and considered saviors of people in the past as individuals before they began fighting one another. For example, when the world was far too flooded, Groudon saved the day and brought light, warmth, and land. Meanwhile, when drought threatened life, Kyogre would bring rain and the oceans to meet the land and saved people as well. Then, of course, whenever these two would meet, a great disaster would follow that threatened the entirety of the planet, at least in the case of their origin forms. In fact, even without fighting each other, if either of them attains their origin form and isn't stopped by Mega Rayquaza, in the modern day at least, the world is doomed to restart. That's at least what the Azoth files state within the Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire games. Nevertheless, the Cave of Origin, or Shrine of Awakening, is a well-guarded cave in Sootopolis City. It is the same place where you can find Kyogre or Groudon, a place where it is stated all life begins, where lives are restarted from their end at the Great Mount Pyre after being laid to rest. But instead we find that it is where Kyogre and Groudon regain their energy. Now, not much else is said when we look at them, but we know that they and Rayquaza have towers built by the people of Hoenn in Johto, which is why the embedded tower exists in Johto. It is a place of worship most likely, but it is primarily a resting spot for the legendary Pokemon. Who worships Kyogre and Groudon? We actually don't really know, at least nothing that I could find. But things do at least get a little bit weirder, because remember those two individuals that look like Archie and Maxie within Legends Arceus? Well, if those were Diamond and Pearl clan leaders, which they are, then that means over the course of 200 or so years, give or take a couple years, that their clans dispersed, or at least people skewed off the beaten path. Given enough time, the worship of Diamond became worship of the Earth, which takes time for a diamond to form. You can extrapolate that if you really want to. And then would be corrupted further to give us Team Magma. A similar pattern can be given to us from pearls to water and Team Aqua, a condensing of space or something. I'm not 100% sure. But this is not me saying Team Aqua and Magma worship Kyogre and Groudon, but the writings of Project Azoth, which, seemingly factual, seem a heck of a lot less like scientific writing and more like religious texts brought to life, these texts being in the care of Archie or Maxie. Let me read those files to you, and I will let you decide for yourself how they seem. Project Azoth file number 1. The goal of Project Azoth is to return the world, return everything to the beginning. In order to further the project, we must proceed with research on Groudon or Kyogre's primal reversion. Primal reversion is a potential of Pokemon evolution, a potential different from Mega Evolution. Mega Evolution is made possible by the energy of people and Pokemon. Primal reversion is made possible by natural energy. In Primal Reversion, Groudon or Kyogre absorbs natural energy into its body, thereby increasing its power dramatically. Both states significantly enhance Pokemon's power. The difference lies in the source of the required energy. Now, it dresses itself as scientific and cold, but the idea of returning the world to its beginning feels like some real Garden of Eden type stuff, an untarnished, beautiful world that resets all that humanity has done wrong, washing away our sins. But unfortunately, this doesn't just reset the world like they thought, it will kill everything and everyone and give the planet a true start from zero. The second file admittedly is more modern and scientific, but I'll still read that one here for you.
We intend to analyze the power of the ultimate weapon used in Kalos 3,000 years ago, and work on the development of a drill weapon utilizing the technology. The seafloor cavern is sealed by the power of a legendary Pokemon. The only way to gain access to the cavern is to break the seal with power that exceeds that of the Pokemon. According to the report from the Petalburg Recon team, Devon Corporation holds the secret of the technology of the ultimate weapon. We will dedicate all of our resources to obtain this technology. The real star of this show, though, as we put Kyogre and Groudon to the side with all their information pretty much gathered in World, the real star, again, is Rayquaza, of course. Not only does it have Sky Pillar, not only does it have a children's tale as told by Ansha and Legend ZA, not only does it have the devoted worship of the Draconids throughout history, as those are the people who constructed not only Sky Pillar, but also the engravings within, but it goes so much further than that. At least within the Pokemon Adventures manga, the leader of the Dragon Clan in Johto flat out has Rayquaza depicted on his helmet. They don't just worship dragons and their power as they learn to tame and live alongside them, but they flat out worship one of the most powerful dragon Pokemon of all time in a completely different region. In fact, this Dragon Clan has so many more ties in the manga than we will find in any other version of the series, but if you want more on that, I do have a video about how the Draconids quote-unquote rule the world. Also, as a note, I still get people groaning over me mixing media, and I'm here to say that Satoshi Tajiri, Ishihara, Miyamoto, Sugimori, Imakuni, and Masude all love the manga as far as we know it, with the first volume having Tajiri's praise stating, "It's a manga closest to the world that I conveyed." He also says, "I think I'll be able to hear the breathing of Pokemon," which is like a huge testament to what the manga really is and how canon it could be. I want to clarify, this is not me saying or arguing that the manga is 100% canon. This is just me telling people to stop getting upset over me crossing canons and having fun with it like they are, when the info lines up really well and allows us to have a greater insight to the world of Pokemon that they want to convey to us. Hell, we knew how Doduo flew since Pokemon Stadium, as it turns out, but got to see it Sanji jump to fly in Pokemon Horizons as well, so if we just looked at other pieces of media, we would have found that out forever ago. So stop being so afraid to cross the universes when things actually make sense, and let's just continue having fun. I'll put away my soapbox for now. You know plenty about Rayquaza and its worship, I'm sure, but ultimately it is the great savior of Hoenn, a being that responds to the world in a crisis and is described as the Delta by AZ for a reason. It is the change. It is the one to change itself to do what must be done and keep people safe. For this and the great feats it has obtained alone and alongside humanity, it has earned its worship by a great deal of people in this world of Pokemon. Solrock has next to no history as a deity, but by the end of the 63rd episode of the Ruby and Sapphire series, Solrock is blasted with water to cool down, which creates steam and causes rain to come down onto a village that originally blamed Solrock for the droughts that they were experiencing. So they went from hating Solrock to calling it the sacred guardian of the spring as a sign of worship. That's all that there is about this sunny boy. And since we already worked through Sinnoh Pokemon, we can move on to Unova, but before we do that, you can have your own symbol of holy power, as you can purchase merch of the Great Wurmpope on Teespring. I don't talk about my merch often enough, but this is too good of an opportunity not to. I love this sad goof so much, and if you do purchase anything from the Teespring, tag me on Blue Sky or throw something onto the community Discord. It's fun just to see people have my merch, so we can move on. The forces of nature were well worshipped and continue to have their shrines taken care of in modern day Unova, or at least one of them that has a shrine. While Tornadus and Thundurus were feared because of the destruction they caused, Landorus would be worshipped properly and loved as it stepped in to stop their fighting and then grants bountiful harvests to the lands. As such, the thankful inhabitants of the land, saved from the danger posed by the Cyclone and Bolt Strike Pokemon, constructed a shrine in honor of Landorus. While Tornadus and Thundurus always fought each other since the beginning of time, they tend to try and avoid each other in order to avoid the wrath of Landorus as a result. The best part about these Pokemon is that they are just the seasons. They're more than that, but at least for this exact moment, they're just the seasons. Thundurus for summer, thunderstorms, and lightning. Landorus for harvest and fertile soil for crops in autumn, which would place it at least seasonally as well between Thundurus and Tornadus, as Tornadus would be winter as it brings cold, harsh winds and storms, and finally Enamorus with spring fresh life, and since it is the love-hate Pokemon, it would even represent fertility and the act of having children. They are all quite literal representations of Kami, since they're forces of nature or incarnations of Hisui. They actually don't have a proper cult or religious following overall, and seem more like a parallel to how Celebi is worshipped. People know of them, they are known to exist, we know that they do have a greater effect on the world and nature as a whole as they travel around the world, and we can thank them for the things that they do for us, while Landorus keeps us safe, and Enamorus blesses us with new life. Tornadus and Thunderous, apparently, though. Of course, Reshiram and Zekrom were worshipped in a time long past, but in the modern day, they are hardly known about. Instead, they're treated more like a rumor until Getsis and Team Plasma pop up and say, "Give me the orb." Crazier is that in the anime, we get a ritual-esque situation seemingly put in place where Getsis summons Reshiram to him and N, rather than trying to awaken it from an orb as we see in every other medium, and I do mean every other medium. Because even in the movies, we see that, they're awoken from an orb in a pretty baller way visually. Here, all 7 sages present, N is the only one in a white robe, almost looking like a sacrificial lamb, visually at least, not what they're actually doing. They're not actually sacrificing him here, but it definitely feels that way, especially knowing what Getsis plans to do to him in the future, and especially since they stand before an altar, and despite being in the modern age, they're surrounded by torchlight. Seriously, you cannot make yourself seem more cultish than using a bunch of torches to light up an area when modern day electricity exists and you could just plug in a stun fisk or something to keep everything powered. Reshiram does attack and the whole castle burns, but at least long before this whole era of time, people of Unova did worship the original dragon until their own squabbles caused it to split. People began arguing over truths and ideals, eventually forcing the dragon to split itself in two in order to embody the concepts separately rather than as a singular unified idea, and whatever that idea is, I have long called it the divine truth, and yes, I do have multiple videos explaining all the different details of this and the connections of dreams to it that you can check out. But what's more important to see here is that this actually, again, wasn't a cult, as I'm constantly saying in this video. The entire original kingdoms of Unova worshipped these dragons until everything fell to ruin, and the stories of these legendary creatures fell to nothing but rumor. Volcarona is another massive Pokemon that you have heard others and myself talk about time and time again, I guarantee. It was worshipped in Relic Castle as a deity of the sun, as well as worshipped in a number of other places, a lot more cult-like. That doesn't include Alola though. They feared this thing because it was already so hot in the region that it was a massive problem, as it would set forests on fire all the time. Understandable that they wouldn't want to worship it there. But in any place without warmth or sunlight due to cataclysmic events like volcanic eruptions or long winters, Volcarona was seen as a literal godsend, something that could grant both warmth and sunlight, quote-unquote, to people who need it most. But something I've long claimed is that Volcarona may have also caused the creation of Yamask, as the only place to naturally encounter Unova and Yamask is within the Relic Castle. Again, not to overplug, Hidden Tragedies video, if you want to hear about that. You deserve the complete story rather than a snippet I would give here. I will say though that this isn't some small, short time worship either. This is a Pokemon that was worshipped for a very long time and may have been worshipped before everything went down the drain, because it does have an entire room with a mural dedicated to it. This is not something you would do if you just started worshipping it for saving you. It's something that would have to be established long term. And whatever happened specifically to Relic Castle is what may have similarly happened in Asado Desert within Paldea, as we do find Larvesta roaming around ruins alongside some other Pokemon that are typically associated with humanity and civilization, thus causing the worship of these Pokemon to have gone by the wayside once more thanks to tragedy and entire civilizations being lost. The only Pokemon I could find in Kalos that was and still is worshipped to some capacity, and not even by a cult, again, technically, is Volcanion. All because people of Southern Kalos have parades and celebrations, thanking it for creating the entirety of Southern Kalos. And I hear you, didn't Volcanion blow up the mountain of Southern Kalos? Yes it did, but not really. Based on info across media and tiny snippets within the games, the story just simply becomes Volcanion blew up the mountain and caused the upper half to land in the water to then create Southern Kalos or something of that effect, and it likely was forced to do this by humanity, thus explaining why it hates humans so much. It would be nice if we were told this directly or got to learn this in the movie, but nope. We have to scrape up the pieces to find this out from the main games, I think ZA, from Lysander in Pokemon Masters of all things, and yeah, it's just rough. And it's amazing as a part of lore for like the region, but it's so simple. Once you find it out, it kind of hurts me a little bit. We otherwise have no real information on those that worship Volcanion and how they do so. Now that we're in Alola, we have a lot of Alolan traditions that follow the worship of nature as a whole, which is what will encompass Solgaleo, Lunala, and the Tapus as our opener for this one. The Tapus have long been revered and feared by the people of Alola, these 4 Pokemon being literal spirits of nature. They derive their power from Alola's natural life, and they use that power to protect Alola and further its overall health, fighting against not only Ultra Beasts that arrive, but also fighting against humanity when they disrespect nature, as we see through Tapu Bulu and its rampage in Tapu Village against the construction of the Thrifty Mega Mart. This power and basically demand of respect over nature is what also allowed the people of Alola to realize that the more they allow themselves to become one with nature, the more they prosper in many ways. And by all means, again, this is not a cult at all. This is a properly recognized internal religion within Pokemon whose basis is nature itself. And as long as nature is respected, then the Tapus have the power to protect the islands from threats. That is, until Solgaleo, the emissary of the sun, and Lunala, the beast that calls the moon, arrived, had a royal smackdown that decimated the Tapus, and then forced them to be babysitters for their baby Cosmog. But get this. The worship of Solgaleo and Lunala are also not cult behavior, because we have plenty of people who are generally aware of them, and we have the altar of Sun and Moon that was specifically built long ago to worship Cosmoem, and would even allow the hyperdense Protostar Pokemon to evolve into either of its final forms. The people of Alola are so in tune with nature that, when questioned on what to do next, they flat out understand what it takes to help the Pokemon that their deities protect reach their own final form as a way to continue aiding the ecosystem as a whole. But wait, because there's more. As at least in the anime, we get to find out that people also understood that Necrozma may have well been a thing, but weren't 100% for sure. At least through documented files that were stored away and uncovered as part of their story. Now, of course, this does contradict every other medium, but it's not all that far-fetched, since Alolans already know the rest of this cosmological history. Plus, in the manga, there are people like Annabelle who already know about Ultra Necrozma, so it gets to become a real mess overall. It kind of feels like the Alolan games had a lot going on, and they really wanted to play on the multiverses exist and they're all canon aspect, and really go nuts with it, since we already were told the Sun and Moon universes were straight up alternate parallel timelines that we could visit in-game, and thus making every other game we play an alternative timeline and universe. Is your head spinning yet? At least the only other detail to note is that within the manga, the people of Ultra Megalopolis did worship Ultra Necrozma as the Blinding One, thus explaining the full origin of the name, or at least one of the origins, because, I mean, it's literally a sun. Do not stare at it, or you will go blind. And again, the whole city of people worshiping it, not really a cult by strict definition. On the lighter side of things, we do have 3 more entries for Alola, starting with Melmetal, a Pokemon that was once worshipped by an ancient civilization for being able to create metal from nothing. Who those ancient civilizations, or that singular civilization is, we do not know, and then Melmetal received its G-Max form, which is in-game thought to be its true form that it was worshipped in. But pump the brakes, because we do not see G-Max Melmetal anywhere else. No murals, no records, nothing as you would expect. Yet we see statues and massive grass murals, I don't know what else to call it, for Toxtricity, so something doesn't add up here. The only way to make sense of this is to look at it in the same way as we would look at some mega evolutions like Ampharos and Aerodactyl, that somehow G-Max unlocks DNA, or just gives enough power to Pokemon to achieve a greater form. And in the case of Melmetal, who are we to say that if 100 Meltan make Melmetal, then this isn't the greater form that would have been created if we slammed 100 Melmetal together? But since it's such a rare Pokemon, we may never see 100 Melmetal and be able to put them together again to create the G-Max form. In fact, though, the ancient people saw it break down long ago and were afraid of how it may rust and break down and just stop existing altogether in the coming years, thus resulting in Meltan being stored away in boxes for their own safety until they could one day assumedly multiply again, or have enough food to thrive once more, or whatever else is necessary in order for them to attain their true glory again. Once again, as I've been saying ad nauseum, I have to preface that this is technically not a cult. The next two entries are a cultural belief that is well established throughout Alola as part of tradition, but I'm going to at least mention them anyway, because that's been the Trojan horse of this video, you know, as we have Alolan Dugtrio and Alolan Ninetales. In the Alola region, Alolan Dugtrio is regarded as a feminine deity of the earth, and taking its hairs is thought to bring bad luck. The people of Alola are known to fall to their knees and bow in respect to any Alolan Dugtrio they encounter. In this land, there is a superstitious belief that several Alolan Dugtrio will emerge out of their holes whenever a volcanic eruption occurs. Older residents of Alola will flee instantly upon witnessing this unusual sight. Meanwhile, Alolan Ninetales lives on Alola's snow-capped Mount Lanakila, which some consider to be holy ground, which of course it is the top of a mountain, which would be a holy site in reflection to the real-world holy site of Mount... I have to look it up, I feel bad. I was going to say Oahu, but that's a whole island. It's Mauna Kea? Is it Mauna Kea? Mount Lanakila is heavily based on Mauna Kea. Okay, thank you, Bulbapedia. I appreciate you. You are a great help to many things. As such, though, Alolan Ninetales is revered as a sacred messenger, or at least in ancient times, it was revered as the incarnation of the deity. And if you don't know what that means, imagine a god creating a mortal form of itself and coming in to say hi. So now you have a turtle in front of you that demands your attention and plenty of blueberries as part of your devotion for it, and you should revere it and fear it. And then, at least by the time we reached Scarlet and Violet, we learned properly that the reason why they stopped worshipping it as an incarnation of a deity is because they realized it was just a regional form of Ninetales, a Pokemon that otherwise would not have existed on the islands were it not for people, assumedly from Johto, bringing them there. Nothing too crazy, but again, not cults, and it's very important to make that distinction time and time again. I actually want to skip ahead to use the semi-finale on the more lackluster example of the Loyal 3 of Paldea and save our finale for our Galar Pokemon. They are legitimately worshipped, and once again, this is not a cult thing, but a full-on tradition, as the Kitsukami Festival is held in their honor. As you might know, the people of Kitsukami thought that Ogerpon was an Oni coming to cause great harm to its people, and the Loyal 3 had been there to sacrifice themselves and stop the threat. This is a parallel to Melmetal the Peach Boy, a boy born from a peach, who traveled with a monkey, dog, and pheasant to save Onigashima from Oni, who had begun terrorizing its people. But of course, as a twist, Ogerpon was not the antagonist here. It was the Loyal 3. Despite this, Ogerpon's name was tarnished as it killed the 3 Pokemon, flat out actually killed them, and Pecharunt entered its slumber. The people of Kitsukami would not know Pecharunt, but would bury the Loyal 3 and erect a shrine in their honor on a high peak to denote their value. A signboard tells the story as the residents saw it. Long, long ago, there was a fearsome ogre in the land of Kitakami. The ogre made its home in the mountain behind the village, frightening all who ventured there. One day, the ogre came down from the mountain in a terrible rage, causing great fear in the village. By some stroke of luck, Okidogi, Munkidori, and Fezandipiti all happened to be there as well. The 3 Pokemon laid down their lives to fend off the ogre and send it back to the mountain. In admiration, the people of the village bestowed upon this brave trio the title the Loyal 3. Their remains were given a proper burial, and statues of the 3 were erected above the site. And this is just their view of when they made Ogerpon really angry. It came down from the mountain, it killed them, and then it went back up the mountain. It's just a different way to view it, right? And even though they're a little lackluster in comparison to other legendary Pokemon, when I stop comparing the Loyal 3 to other legendaries, I actually really do enjoy the entire story, seeing multiple sides from it, and the theme that Kitsukami had, and how it treated its Pokemon overall. Plus, you know, that DLC gave me Ogerpon, who instantly became a top 3 Pokemon in my heart, so, you know, I gotta love it. Calyrex is our final Pokemon, one that is technically a cult in the modern day, one that I have talked about ad nauseum lately because of the specific knowledge that it directly lets us know that when people worshipped it, it committed great acts of benevolence towards people and Pokemon with incredible power. It made the land fertile and gave it abundant life. It saved entire forests from disaster. It allowed life to thrive where there was none in such a harsh environment, and even when it fought others, it would turn the other cheek and heal them back to normal. It is arguably one of the most religious Pokemon of them all, besides our Sinnoh legendaries, specifically Arceus, and yet it has given no real love in the Pokemon community. It even tells us that when people stopped worshipping it and forgot it, it lost more and more of its power, which just made me realize something important. We know that it fought Eternamax on the darkest day originally. We know that despite winning, it was injured and fell to the Crown Tundra where life began anew for it. We know that the Galarian royalty would rewrite history in their name, in their own benefit, hiding the true heroic Pokemon who saved the day. We see two horses that once belonged to Calyrex running rampant, and we know that if people started forgetting Calyrex, it would grow weaker. What if, then, this means that because of the royal family making everyone forget, that over time, as Calyrex lost power, it could no longer keep the people of Crown Tundra safe, that they would see it grow weak, and even if they did believe in it, it wouldn't be able to make the fields bloom anymore. It wouldn't be enough to empower the creature, and the people who lived here would either lose faith over time or simply pass away, thus leaving Calyrex to be a shadow of a myth, a forgotten Pokemon who once held great power, a king no longer bearing a crown. And I think I need to expand on this more one day. This doesn't feel like it's enough as I keep finding more and more, but maybe one day with enough people, Calyrex will be able to start anew. But for now, it has only gained a few of its powers since we meet it again, still becoming a very powerful Pokemon with only 2 people believing in it, so imagine what its unbound limits would be if it had the faith of all of Galar under it. To get there, it seems as though Calyrex will have to begin as a cult and expand back to its full religious status. And maybe, again, it's time I dedicate a video in the future, or at least write it on my list, for Calyrex and its full history, the Lost King of Galar. But for now, that is all for today. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss any other deep dives on this channel. I also want to thank members of the channel, as you see on screen right now. Thanks to their contributions, I can take the time necessary to make quality content for everyone. This one was a little bit more of a flyover, despite diving deep into some of the earlier Pokemon like Arceus and the, Trio of Myth. Though if you want early access to videos, behind the scenes info, and members exclusive content like this list here, become a member for as little as $3 a month. It makes a massive difference. I will also repeat that starting November 1st, I will have a Streamathon Nuzlocke where I draw the Pokemon and raffle them off to those that donate towards the event as I raise funds for my wedding. Again, also, let me know what Pokemon you would upgrade to godly levels and what it would be the god of, because again, sounds super fun to read about. Not only do I love reading your comments, but it appeases the almighty algorithm alongside likes and hypes. And as a highlight, one of the best comments from this past week is not from one person, but multiple people, as I released a short on East Shellos going extinct, and I had a ridiculous number of comments stating that they will give East Shellos the Lapras treatment, breed a bunch, and release them to the wild in order to save the species. And I love it. While all of those comments were on a short, if you do want to know what Pokemon are facing extinction, you can check out that video or one of the many other freaking videos that I mentioned here as part of the end screen of this video. But that is all for today. So as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I will see you next time.